Welcome to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss. In today's video, I just big news. I just got approved for a religious exemption or accommodation at my place of employment as of yesterday afternoon. And I wanted to share how I was able to do it, the steps I took and or the understanding of it to help any and all of you out. So pay attention and stay tuned to the video. And hopefully some of these tips will help you. It's not 100%, but it's a pretty good guarantee and or decent shot at securing a religious exemption as it pertains to the jab mandate for your particular job and or place of employment, because I was all about, and I did videos way back when Biden did the first press conference and even following after the mandate started rolling out in November, that I was prepared to hold the line and potentially lose my job, and still prepared to. But I say, it's like Tupac once said, is when you start to understand the levels of the rules of the game, the world's no longer a trick no more, but the world is a game to be played. No sense in taking an L for the cause if you don't have to take a complete L. You can still stand firm, fight the good fight, while not allowing the employers the satisfaction of letting you go, but rather putting up a decent fight to either maintain your ground while giving the middle finger to their jab mandates and letting them know that you're not getting it and there's nothing that much that they can do about it, and or if they do try to hold their line, you have a decent chance of fighting and winning in court. So I'm going to share my strategies and what I did in order to get that accommodation approved. But before I get into that, don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel. Your subscriptions go a long way with allowing me to produce new content and or getting this message out there. Now, with that said, let's talk about, again, religious exemptions. I do think that there was a trick being played as it pertains to these vaccine mandates rolling out. Not only were employers trying to beat the clock as it pertains to forcing a lot of employees to get the jab before it got defeated in court and they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but on top of that, give individuals an idea and or belief that there was no way to beat this mandate with your employment unless if by some miracle you got a doctor to sign off on the medical exemption, which is already hard to do even in legit cases, as we've seen people talk about getting adverse reactions and going to their doctors as a result of getting an adverse reaction to the first jab and not being able to get an exemption from getting the second jab just because these doctors are being pressured in order to not sign exemptions and or to promote nothing but the jab from the pharmaceutical companies, or otherwise risk being investigated and or have their license challenged, and they don't want to deal with the fight even if it's one that they can win. Not everyone wants to put up that fight. So getting a medical exemption is extremely hard, but they also tried to present it that getting a religious exemption was going to be darn near impossible. Just listen to this clip from, I believe, CBS News article, which I'm going to prove to be completely false momentarily. Let's take a quick clip.
More and more companies are starting to announce their return to work plans and announcing how they'll be handling vaccines. Just this week, the NFL said they plan to restrict employees who refuse COVID-19 vaccines without medical or religious reasons. So what does that mean for you and your job? Employment attorney Jamie Wright joining us this morning to answer some of your questions. Thanks so much for being here, Jamie.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Look, as someone who covers this daily, I keep hearing about this company and that company's plans for employees regarding vaccines. Also, what's required to get into sporting events. So let's just start with this. Can a company require its employees to get a COVID vaccine?
The answer is yes, with certain exceptions. Here in California, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing says that you can, as long as you don't discriminate against that employee based on protected categories that are stated in the law and ADA, disability and or religious held beliefs. So,
and when it comes to the religious held beliefs, you just have to say, simply put, for religious reasons, I don't want it? Or do you have to show any proof, or how does that kind of work?
It's a slightly heightened standard. It has to be a sincerely held religious belief. And what the case law says is that over time, this has been your belief. You actively practice in this faith. And there's some form of documentation that you can provide that say you're a member of a church, a mosque, a synagogue, to prove that this is your sincerely held belief and you're not just using it to get an exemption from the vaccination.
So they pretty much were presenting the argument that when it comes to religious exemption, you darn near needed your religious, if you're a person of faith. So this pretty much eliminated atheists and or agnostics who were also against the mandates and or just against the jab in general for a variety of legit reasons. But it also made a lot of people who are those who are of faith feel as though, well, there's no way I can get this, because if you're Catholic, the Pope endorsed the jab. I don't believe the Catholic Church is requiring it in any and all areas where they can avoid it, but rather leaving it up to the personal choice of the bishops, nuns, priests, and their respective parishes. But there was no way in which you can, as a Catholic, get a priest and or bishop or have you to sign off given the Catholic position. Same thing with most Christians, unless if you're Jehovah's Witness and or Amish. There was very few, if not almost no Christian, Protestant Christian community that you can probably find that would sign off on signing a religious exemption, or a pastor, bishop, what have you, that would do that, because a lot of them are either for it, or many people knew that they could not find a theological and or scriptural base. Same thing with Jews and or those who fall under Israeli and or Hebrew, especially considering that, and I've mentioned this many times on my channel in previous videos, that Israel is actually ahead of the curve in terms of all countries when it comes to jab and or getting their population jabbed. They are so far ahead of so many other countries that they were already the first to realize that the jabs wore off after the first 2 doses, if you got Pfizer or Moderna, and that a booster was needed, and they're already on a 4th jab or 4th booster for their country. That's how far ahead of the curve they are. But I say that to say, hard pressed to find a religious exemption for Jews and or those who fell under the belief of Israel or Hebrew Israel, what have you, considering that Israel as a country and or as a Jewish practice, they were all in line for it. Same thing with Islam, Buddhist, Hindu. It was going to be hard pressed to find and to get a religious exemption. But here in America, just speaking, the majority are obviously Christian, Muslim, and or Jewish. So you're going to be extremely hard pressed to get that exemption. But that's not true. And here's how I beat it. I found out that Venable had a different definition of what is a religious exemption. Let's take a look. Now, according to Venable's Employer's Guide to the Religious Exemption for COVID-19 Vaccine, and you may ask, well, who is Venable? A little brief history on who they are and what they're about. So they are a trusted law firm of advisors serving businesses, organizations, and individuals in many and most important aspects of their work. They've been around for over 121 years, spanning virtually every industry and or all areas of regulatory and government affairs, corporate and business law, intellectual property, and complex litigation. So this is a really well authoritative site as it pertains to legal matters, especially in this particular area. So what do they say about the religious mandate, which may blow your mind based upon a lot of the lies and or manipulation that we've been told, and or I guess you can say not so much even told, but insinuated, suggested, or led to believe by so many people, whether it be our own employers and or those in the media, as seen in the previous clip, is what they say about the vaccine policy and what is a religious exemption is specifically the policy can explain that a sincerely held religious belief is a belief that can be either theistic or, and this is the big one which will throw a lot of people off in terms of blowing your mind and will definitely counter the narrative. It can either be theistic or a moral and or ethical belief as to what is right and wrong, but both are acceptable if they are sincerely held. I repeat, a religious belief can either be theistic or moral and or an ethical belief as to what is right and wrong. Now, this is a very important distinction in their definition of what counts as a religious exemption. It's not just what we traditionally believe to be religious held belief, i.e. something you can find in scriptures, but rather they're distinguishing the difference between theistic, which if you're not sure what theistic means a belief in a spiritual being, higher power, a God. So that does relate to your religious community, yes. But then they also have a different clause, and that's why they distinguish with the word and or a moral or ethical belief in what is right and wrong, good and evil, etc. You don't need to have a religious belief, i.e. the support of your religious community. If you are a person of faith, you can be an atheist, agnostic, or a person of faith who, so long as you have a sincerely held belief of what is right and wrong as it pertains to this jab mandate existing around the world, you fall under a religious mandate. They don't make you think that. Again, the idea was that you had to have the support of your religious community, whatever that happened to be, and get them to sign off on your religious exemption to get it. No, you as an individual need to express that you have a sincerely held moral and or ethical belief of what was going on. Now, one of the things I did to help make my case was, now I did quote Venable in my explanation. I didn't just rely on it, but I did reference them, that I was using them as my source to let the HR department know I knew what I was talking about. I knew my rights. I knew my laws. I know about Venable, and I know what you need to be held to in terms of also staying in compliance with Title IX. I did that as mostly a warning shot, but you can't just rely solely on that. But I did use part of that in my description to let them know I knew what the definition was. I knew what the parameters were and what they needed to be held by. And just in case if they weren't originally aware, I let them know, pointed them to the right direction of, okay, darn. And then I went in to proceed to explain that this was, and I put it in bold letters, capital letters even, these are my sincere, I made sure I put in bold capital letters the word sincere. These are my sincere beliefs as to why these mandates are wrong. I wanted to emphasize the word sincere since that was heavily implied as being part of the definition. And I went on to explain why I felt as though what is going on in the world in terms of the jab mandates and what I'm seeing happen across the globe, whether it be the COVID camps in Australia and forcefully moving people away from their homes, which I talked about in a previous video. Feel free to go check that out. And a lot of people try to say, oh no, that's just for international travelers. No, they're moving actual native residences who haven't traveled at all, but who either were in close contact with someone who tested positive and or they themselves tested positive, no longer have the right to even self-isolate at their own home, but are being forcefully moved in many cases to a camp, internment camp, if you will. I was morally against that, and I referenced that. I referenced how this is being used to segregate people, to take away people's right, and especially as a person of color, segregation of any kind, I take extremely personal, and I am morally against this on principle of the matter. Seeing what happened in Germany, I referenced Germany and Austria, how they were using this to segregate individuals and saying, okay, initially it was only the vax had the right to enjoy society's rules, can go out shopping, eating, going to restaurants, whereas the unjabbed were forced to isolate at home, only able to go out of their homes to go to work and or to buy groceries. Otherwise, they were getting stopped to showing their papers, and how showing your papers, whether that be in Austria, Germany, or around the world, especially with the health pass, green cards, and or showing proof of jab, that you've been jabbed, is just repeating the history of what helped lead to and or was a factor in the Holocaust and or the extermination of the Jews in Nazi Germany, not to mention what's happening in Australia and what we're seeing potentially happen in places like in Canada in terms of forcibly removing people and forcing them into camps, is also close to not only what happened in Germany, but what happened to the Japanese here in America after Pearl Harbor. Morally against what I see going on, and now I'm also seeing it play out here in the United States, where they are putting not only people's jobs, their livelihoods at risk over this mandate. We're seeing people being discriminated at restaurants, movie theaters, gyms, schools, places of employment now. This is medical discrimination. This is not right under any circumstances. And I am morally against and sincerely against any attempts of segregation of individuals, whether that be segregation based upon race, religion, skin color, and or in this case medical decisions, especially a medical decision that has no consequence of the virus in and of itself, because you can still, even if you get double jab, triple jab, quadruple jabbed, we're still seeing people one after another get the virus, spread the virus to others. So what's the point other than a larger agenda also to line up the pockets of big pharma, which I'm also against. This has also all led to big censorship and groupthink and or the thought police being able to take over. I listed a lot of these examples and things as to why I am morally against it and why this is all wrong. So that's the path that I took in order to be in or get the religious accommodation. It also helped that I am from Texas as well, and I did refer to Texas state law, and also they had to include in my religious exemption, and this is another thing they don't tell you. So if you live in Texas and or Florida, you have laws protecting you against the jab mandate. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott signed an executive order, Order 40, back in October of 2021, forbidding any employer from requiring and or forcing any customer and or employee from requiring to get jabbed so long as they had a religious, medical, or personal reason. They even made it even easier. And then in Florida, you have House Bill 1 and Senate bill that was passed back in, what was it? I believe early December, if not late November, passed by Florida state legislature and then signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis, making that even stronger than Greg Abbott's executive order, because this is now law that cannot change based upon the changing of a new governor who can just do away with the previous governor's executive order, but rather you would have to actually change the entire state legislature, state Senate, state House of Representatives, and then have a new bill introduced, passed, and then signed by that governor. Like, it'll be much harder to do that in Florida, but I digress. They have that law, which even opens it up, not only makes it even more enforceable, more withstanding, but also more so opens up employers from discrimination lawsuits if they do discriminate based upon jab requirements or being jabbed or not. And I say this to say that any employer that issues out quote unquote religious exemptions, they may not list it as this is a Texas and or Florida rules and or accommodation form. They'll have it all under the religious, or at least that's what they did for me. That also under the religious accommodation form that I got, there was a specific section, since I live here in Texas, that had a line for the personal reason as well. So I would believe that that would also be true for Florida, but just know as a Texan and or Floridian, you have that extra protection of just needing to have a personal reason why you're against getting the jab as well. So there are a lot of things that aren't being explained. A lot of employers and or the media are making it seem like, again, you just need, you have to have the extraordinary circumstance of having a medical doctor sign off on an exemption for you. And if you can't get that, to have a religious leader and or a religious community sign off for a religious accommodation, that's not so. Again, you just need to articulate that you have a sincere held belief of what is happening and of what's going on, and the implementation of these mandates are wrong. And if you're Texan and Floridian, you not only have that extra protection, but again, they're sneaking it in the religious accommodation or religious exemption forms on your employers. Again, I haven't seen the Florida one, but again, as a Texan with a Texas employer whose HR had to give me the form to fill out to explain my religious accommodation, included in there, they had the section for, because you're a Texan residents, you have the right to a personal exemption. I would have never known that, especially asking my management. They would have never known and or explained that to me. In fact, I don't think they really wanted to. They wanted my compliance, but I had to wait to do the form in order to see that it was on there. I already knew that that was the case though. I've done videos on that. You can go check that out. Please support my channel, check my content. The more you view and or click and or comment and interact, it gets the engagement going. It helps raise awareness of the information that they want suppressed out there. I already knew about that law, but I didn't know that that would be wrapped in the religious accommodation form. So that's the rights that you do have. So just know your rights. I say play the game, hold the line, don't comply, but don't let them win any battles whatsoever. You know, you can hold the line and not get jabbed, but play the game smart. No sense in losing your source of income. Do the accommodation route, So you can still give them the finger as it pertains to not complying, and you can let them know. And you don't have to comply so long as you fall in line. If you come across an employer that wants to be a prick about it all and say, you know what, I've read it and I'm not gonna approve it anyway, they're in violation of, as you would see from the Venable website, Title IX, because they have to abide by that ruling and or understanding of what is a religious exemption and or accommodation. They have no choice. That's law. And if you have an employer that decides to be ignorant about it and or try to fight and then do so by terminating you, again, no need for you to just take the L and just to be on the moral right side of things. I say take that employer with you. Let them know, hire an employment lawyer, especially with tax season rolling around the corner. If there was one thing you want to do and or use your tax refund for, is put a little money aside for an employment lawyer that can fight this. That would be an easy EEOC lawsuit complaint that you can win. The majority of EEOC lawsuits, at the very least, on average, you can come out victorious with about your year's worth of salary or more in terms of winning, with a smaller percentage in six figures and as many as much as 10% of all EEOC cases resulting in $1 million cases. So I don't want you to have the false perception that any EEOC lawsuit that you will definitely be able to win, because that would be a clear violation of the EEOC mandates in terms of employment discrimination and or requirements for them to provide some form of accommodation. But I didn't want to give you the false impersonation that you would just be rich for life. But at the very least, if you can get back not just your year's salary, I say if they're going to try to take you down, you bring them down with you, like a kamikaze. Like, all right, you're going to fire me. All right, I'm going to make you pay for that. I'm taking your butt to court. Especially if you live in Texas or Florida, you definitely have the additional grounds of having the state to be able to back you up. So it won't just be an EEOC lawsuit, but rather you should file a suit and or report them to the state. So not only will the employer get it from the state level, but then they'll also be getting it from you. Let them know that they can't get away with it. Again, no sense in taking L's across the board just to be morally right, but rather let them know that we have options, and if you're going to try to take us down, we're going to bring you down with us. By the way, my path wasn't exactly perfectly smooth like that. I applied for the accommodation back on Tuesday, December the 7th, 2021. I wanted to wait for the court rulings as it pertains to the federal contractors that I knew was being played out in the courts. And it just so happened it came that day. I was very happy. So once the federal lawsuit got blocked in the courts, I then felt comfortable to start or initiate my accommodation. Although I didn't submit it, or I wanted to do my research in a little bit more on that to work on how I was going to articulate. And I had about 17 days. So that literally gave me until Christmas. And so I took my time. I submitted my accommodation form on Tuesday, December the 21st. However, I then got notified last minute on Monday afternoon, no less, that my accommodation was rejected because they claimed they never received it, despite the fact that I know I filled out the PDF file form. I emailed it back on December the 21st, a whole 4 days or 89 hours prior to the deadline date. I mean, assuming that December 25th on the dot was the deadline. Otherwise, I had over 96 hours if I had to the end of the day of December 25th. But either way, I was 4 days in advance in submitting my completed form. I confirmed that the sent email included an attachment of the completed form, but they tried to come at me with the denial that they never received it. And therefore, my case was not only closed, but it was not open for appeal and or reconsideration, and that really they were saying, all right, you ran out of tries when it comes to religious accommodation. Your only option now is to get the jab. I was like, oh, heck no. So I found out the name of the HR representative that was handling the reasonable accommodations. I tried calling her on the work number. She wouldn't answer or was not answering, or I kept getting, and in some cases if I stayed on the line long enough to hear it ring out, instead of a voicemail option, I was getting, this call cannot be completed as dialed, despite the fact after hearing rings for a good number of rings. It wasn't an immediate, this number could not be dialed. There were numerous rings before I got that message. So I was like, okay, you're gonna play it like that? I'm gonna send you an email then. So not only did I email this individual, I CC'd their supervisor. I actually forwarded the email that I sent on the 21st to show proof of the timeline of when I sent it, to let them know that not only if they deny this and try to push me into a corner, I'm gonna file, if this jeopardizes my employment because I can't apply for another accommodation, Lord knows I don't apply, I would never be able to get a medical exemption with so many physicians being pressured to not sign those or forced to be investigated and or have to worry about fighting investigations as to why they're signing so many medical accommodations. I was like, if this affects my employment with this company, I not only have the grounds for and I put this in the email, I not only have the grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit, because I am providing proof right now, and I can also prove it in court if need be, providing my hard drive that this was sent out on the 21st, well before 4 days before the due date. And if you are denying it, despite me doing everything right, the problem is on you, not me. And if this jeopardizes my employment, not only do I have the ground for a wrongful termination lawsuit, but I have provided for y'all as well my personal or both personal and religious reasons, sincerely held beliefs as to why I am against this. And specifically as a Texas resident, you are forbidden as a company from, and I included a screenshot of Governor Greg Abbott's executive order release that came out shortly after the federal court here in Texas blocked the federal contractors mandate, and therefore there was a blockage pretty much on all of the mandates. OSHA at the time, before that ruling got rescinded, unblocked I should say, OSHA, CMS, and the federal contractors. Greg Abbott put out a press release, and I let them know I knew the numbers and email address to contact for job loss as a result of violation of Texas workforce and agency. I knew what Texas law was. I included a screenshot of it to let them know I was prepared to take this to court if need be, and I was aware of my laws. So I need y'all to rectify this on your end. Please do so. Thank you. And I ended with a little smiley face, thank you, smiley face, to let them know that it wasn't all confrontational, but if you push it to that point, I know my laws, I know my rights, I know what you need to be held accountable for. So let's get this done. And including the manager in the email definitely helped add extra priority. So shortly thereafter, about an hour later, I did get an email response from this reasonable accommodation HR representative, letting me know that they were forwarding it over to the appropriate individuals to handle and review. And her manager was CC'd in on it. Oops, I used a gender pronoun, so at least you know the gender. And by the end of the day yesterday, I got an email to my work email, despite the fact that a lot of these original accommodations were being done and or sent through our personal emails. I got an email letting me know that my accommodation by the end of the day, same day yesterday, was approved. That sure did get escalated pretty quickly and resolved in my favor. There was no fight. I don't see how they were able to actually review my accommodation. I find that very interesting as well, but I think I did put the pressure on them and let them know, because knowledge is power. You have to let them know what you know in order to play the game right, and they won't mess with you. I think this world, and there are forces in the world that try to take advantage of those who don't know their rights, don't know what their moves are, what their options are. And even those people who try to take advantage are usually oftentimes not as informed as need be, and try to take advantage of those who are even less informed than them. And by the time they come across a mind or an individual who comes with knowledge and their information of, holy crap, oh, I didn't know about this, really, huh? And so you have to know your rights, you have to be empowered and push back. Again, this is all a game, and the world is a game to be played. You have to know the rules and the levels. So that's what happened to me. That's what I did in my understanding of things, because I just don't think that you should hold the line. This is definitely a fight to be had, a war to be had, but be smart about it. Don't just take an L for the moral victory and or the bigger picture. Either be in a position to still collect an income while still defying the mandates and holding the line against it, and or take the employers down with you if they're willing to fight. Because if they're going to let you go anyway, why should you be the only one taking an L and an income loss? A lawsuit is expensive, but at the end of the day, a lot of these employers, if they know they're in the wrong, and this would be an easy EEOC lawsuit complaint, is, it's about the long game, much like with, who was it? Nick Sandman, in terms of his big win. Who would have thought he would be able to get a big settlement from, mainstream media like that? So you have to be willing to fight back. And so that's my video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know how it went for you if you do the same thing. Again, I'm not saying this is 100%, but this law is soundproof pretty much. And so you should have a decent chance of, again, if not winning the accommodation, you have a legal grounds in terms of an EEOC lawsuit because they are not upholding to the religious accommodation or how it's truly understood. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, comment on this video. Please share this video with anyone you think who needs to hear it, especially if you don't live in a great state of Texas and or Florida, where laws are currently on the books, whether it be in the form of an executive order and or signed legislative law in the state, where you have that extra protection, because a lot of people, unfortunately, in the other 48 states, especially those up north, don't have as much protection on a state level. You should be able to get the religious accommodation so long as you prove to have a sincerely held moral and or ethical belief. All right, so with that said, this is Bruce the Boss, and I'm out. Peace.